Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall. Laura Dierks of Interboro Spirits and Ales is here this week in a conversation that centers around the news dominating the beer industry. But first, an invitation to check out beeredge.com, where you can subscribe to the newsletter, check out the Defend Pilsner and This Week in Rauk Beer merch, read articles, and find podcast interviews. Also, check out Beer Edge on social media at The Beer Edge. NZ Hops is a proud sponsor of Drink Beer, Think Beer. Harvest has officially ended in New Zealand, and there are exciting hops to choose from, including Nelson Sauvin, Motueka, Ruaka, and the newest hop in the lineup, Nectaron. The white wine, stone fruit, and tropical fruit notes, layered with pine, citrus, and herbal notes, offer a range of flavors unlike any other growing region in the world. Learn more about what they can do for your beers by visiting nzhops.co.nz or finding NZ Hops on social media. Briess has been malting barley for 145 years, and the fifth generation of family ownership is currently leading the company, but the values have always remained the same, producing the highest quality, most consistent malt, and working directly with their customers to help them succeed. From pilsners to porters and everything in between, Briess offers the finest handcrafted malts, extracts, and adjuncts to help you brew the perfect beer. Visit Briess.com or visit their social media channels to see and to learn more. As I mentioned briefly last week on the show, Brianne Allen of Notch Brewing has been sharing stories of women in the beer industry. So far, hundreds of women have come forward with stories of abuse, harassment, and worse by men in and around the brewing industry. Among the news and the announcements was a statement from Laura Dierks, the founder of Interboro Spirits and Ales in Brooklyn. In a signed note, she announced that it was postponing the brewery's upcoming Pils City Festival because two breweries that have come under fire were planning on participating. She wrote, quote, "We cannot stand aside when some colleagues are physically or emotionally unsafe, feel unsafe, or not respected for their intellectual contributions in our community, regardless of who they are externally." End quote. Dierks and Jesse Furguson founded the brewery in 2016 and have turned it into one of the most respected and innovative breweries in the city. Known for their beers, the company's spirit program is also known for great recipes, including a canned gin and tonic cocktail. Laura's been speaking out on social media about the treatment of women in the industry, and I'm grateful that she agreed to come on this show. This is a difficult subject that can't be ignored, and she offers up her own experiences and how the brewery is looking to be a leader in the space going forward. She spoke to me over Zoom from Brooklyn. Here's our conversation. While some people claim to be surprised by what's happening, you actually wrote on social media last week, quote, "No woman in any industry has escaped this, whether they're open about it or not. We've just been taught not to talk about it. That time needs to be over and face the difficult path forward towards truth and reconciliation." And then I saw another statement. You talked about this happening to you within the brewing community and in academia and tech and finance and the military throughout your life. And I wonder if you remember the first instance something like that happened to you after you got into the beer and beverage industry.
So since I founded Interboro, the first things that you do, right, when you're going to start a business the size that Interboro is that you raise capital, right? So we raise some capital in order to build a brewery of the size that we're at. We have a 30-barrel brew house. We do spirits. Yeah, we do spirits as well. So my vision was that we'd be where we are right now, despite everything else that's happening, that we're about to release our first whiskey. So that means that we had to invest a fair amount of capital in buying equipment, the brew house, all the cellar equipment, all the distillery equipment, all the barrels that we were going to need in the intervening years before we could release a whiskey and do all of this, right? So it's a fair amount of capital. Some of that's mine, and some of that, I had to look outside. So the first thing that happened in sort of this whole journey was that Jesse and I were on a call. We had probably had a couple meetings already with this group of investors, and they were my age now. I'm 53, to give you some sense of how long I've been around on the planet. But we had, Jesse and I were sitting at my kitchen table. We were having a conference call with this group of investors, and they're, middle-aged, and I say that broadly, 40s, 50s, in finance. And we had gone through the financial projections that I had built. We'd gone through a number of questions, and then you sort of wrapping up at the end. And one of the guys said, "So, just want to ask this question." He says, "So how are you going to be a good mom and run this business?"
Oof.
Jesse's chin, I think, hit the counter. I think he had 2 small children at that time. I have 3, but older, a little, not terribly older, but they were.
Your kids are older than Jesse's kids.
Yeah, my kids are older than Jesse's kids. My kids were, I guess, 10, 11, 8, and 7 at that time. But Jesse's kids were smaller.
Yeah.
They did not ask him how he would be a good dad. So, we paused. I was grateful at that moment that we were on a conference call, not even Zoom, so nobody could see my face. And I had to answer it. And so I answered it with, I have a nanny who's going to help me. My husband, super helpful at home. I think I can do this. And the guy said, okay. And they did invest with us. But it's pretty ingrained. It happens at a lot of turns. After that was probably when one of these investors brought someone in to visit when we were opening, probably the soft opening. And we were introduced as the founders together, Jesse and I. And the guest said to me, "So glad you're allowing Jesse to live his dream."
Wow.
And my poor investor guy, his jaw hit the ground, but he did not correct his friend. And I didn't say anything. I don't even know what happened. I think Jesse intervened to save me, to just be like, "Yeah, let me show you around," or something like that. But the gentleman was not corrected in any way. The polite company kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that happens more often than not, and that's in the sort of just ignored kind of category, or, people make assumptions. And those assumptions are usually along those lines, right? So that's sort of where it starts, I'd say.
Yeah. And you've worked in other arenas beforehand. Yeah, as you put in this statement, as I read just before, of, tech and academia and finance. When you first started thinking about getting into the beverage industry, especially like craft, right, which has, at least from the outside, had a pretty decent PR campaign of, we're different, we're not the big players, we're welcoming, et cetera, et cetera. What was, I don't know. Has that just been smoke and mirrors? Has that just been willful ignorance, or?
I don't think so. I think there's a general shift in society towards being more welcoming and inclusive. And in fact, as we've sort of ironically right at this time been sort of working on really going back and setting core values for the company, inclusivity comes up from everyone. We want to be inclusive. We want our company to reflect the city we live in. We want that to be the case. Whether it's true or not, is always the thing.
Yeah.
Society around us is not like that. So I do believe that there's an intent to be that way. I think the reality on the ground can be different, and it can be hard, even with the best intentions. we certainly, even in our, uh, for us, struggling when you have a couple candidates and some candidates have more experience than other candidates. And that is, the predetermined kinds of things that come into who gets that experience, the shot at that the first time, right? Who's given that first opportunity so that they can get the second. And that, has their biases that just lead to that. So, but the best we can do is try. And I think that we have, like we had come out last week, we have a lot of space to grow. And there are a lot of people who have powerful positions in the industry, who can then, impact other people's abilities to succeed. And we just get more people. Honestly, we get more African American people, more women in in positions of power, so that they can make more of those decisions. And I hope that is the path towards change.
When you talk about core values, it some of the conversations that I've had over the course of the last week, with brewers, with owners that are sort of reconciling with mistakes that they've made, and ways that their business can be better. A lot of them have said, when I started this, I was in my 20s. I was kind of stupid. I was more focused on making sure that, my hats looked cool, as opposed to making sure that I had, good employee practices in place. Because, hats are fun in your 20s, and employee practices are not fun in your 20s, or, at any age. When you think about core values, and you think about new people getting into the industry, or people rethinking how their business should be, what are the core values that you're thinking about? What are the core values that you want to be representative of Interboro?
Well, bringing people together has always been one of the things that I've had in my head about what I want the company to do. We want to do what, probably comes up with every business of our type, right? And consumer packaged goods, regardless of producing great products, right? But the whole idea in hospitality, in any hospitality, is to bring people together, and figuring out ways that we can bring people together actively, by making people feel comfortable, by being educational, by being non-judgmental about what people bring to the party. Do they know anything about craft beer or craft spirits? Do they come with preconceived notions about what they like or don't like? Have they had any experience before at all, with the kinds of beverages we produce? And just being very welcoming, is definitely on the top of the list. And that leads to some of that inclusivity. That's really the top thing. From the company perspective, we have the same thing, internally, right? We have to be tolerant of each other and welcoming, and wanting to build that team, and be open and honest about our mistakes, open and honest about making change. The idea of making sure that there's not judgment when something goes wrong. How do we postmortem things and make sure that we're all coming together and being like, yeah, mistakes were made, like that happens. No matter what you do, there are going to be mistakes, whether it's because you didn't see COVID coming, or you didn't expect something to, some snowstorm, things that you can't predict. And then other things where maybe you could have predicted it, or should have predicted it, or something. And somebody is clearly sort of falling down on the part of their job, or maybe they didn't know it was their job. Having that kind of ability for people to come together without judgment internally and externally is definitely a key.
More with Laura in just a moment, but first, a word from this episode's sponsors, and I hope you'll give them a closer look. Briess is the original craft maltster and currently offers the broadest product line in the industry. Briess's barley is grown in the Bighorn Basin of Wyoming and Montana, where warm days, cool nights, and floodwater irrigation yield some of the highest quality barley in the United States. And if you're thinking about beer competitions and the newly announced New Zealand Pale Ale and New Zealand IPA categories, visit NZ Hops online at nzhops.co.nz or find them on social media. There you'll learn about varieties bursting with white wine, stone fruit, tropical fruit aromas, and more. Hops from New Zealand are unlike any others found on the globe. Discover them today. And now back to my conversation with Laura Dierks of Interboro Spirits and Ales in Brooklyn. A lot of these stories that have come up and a lot of the interactions, it's been largely focused on people within the brewing industry or hospitality industry interacting with other people in the hospitality industry or brewing industry. But the inclusivity thing also extends to the consumer base as well, which has also been another narrative that has come out of some of these stories as well of, who walks through your door and how are they treating staffs, how are they treating other patrons, how are they treating the people that they're with. As you start to think about, opening back up again in Interboro, like most breweries now, I'm not even saying post-COVID, but with vaccine rates up and restrictions lessened, are you thinking about that as well, of proper behavior within your walls by consumers?
Yeah, for sure. COVID, of course, complicates everything.
It sure does. Yeah.
Everyone interacts in the brewery, in the tap room, and how that all comes together. We've had, just the shift in staff, and having to reset in a lot of ways, because, people moved away and things shifted as we had to, furlough people back last March. And so we are still working towards, how do we make sure that we have a balanced staff internally that helps us to bring people in, that there are people behind the bar that are welcoming to them and can invite everybody in, and then that the staff that the customers interact with our staff well as well. That it's very hard. Everybody's kind of relearning it, I think, as we come back. It's gone really, really pretty well so far. We've had a lot of customers in, and things are growing. Week after week, it's a little bit higher each week, a little bit better. But yeah, it's we all have to relearn it, I think, relearn how to interact with each other.
Yeah, but also just on Steal This Beer this week, Megan Parisi of Boston Beer was on, and we were talking about the consumer experience, and somebody who says something demeaning to a server or to a bartender or something along those lines, and how come action isn't taken more often. And she summed it up pretty succinctly with, it's money. And you want to make sure that the lights can stay on, and so sometimes people look the other way. I don't know how much Interboro has experienced bad actors at the bar, but is that something that you're? Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you that with all of this that has happened, right, in the industry, we had a pretty frank conversation at our all hands meeting last week, to make very, very clear to our staff that we don't tolerate any of this behavior from anyone in our premises, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who they are. If it's visiting brewers, if it's customers, if it's staff between staff, that anyone who feels, anyone who feels that someone has crossed a line like this, that it's important that we talk about it. and important that we kind of really, really take it seriously no matter what, because it is about this not just letting it happen and turning a blind eye that allows it to continue.
Hmm.
We don't talk about it. We say, well, it was just a joke, or, they're just trying to be funny, or they didn't really mean it. All of those things soft pedal the reality of the fact that we're not addressing it head on. So when something happens, something needs to be said. And even if it's that, yes, it was sort of like at the edge, it wasn't really meant in that direction, like somebody interpreted. I won't even say misinterpreted. I will say interpreted, because communication is 50%, the person speaking, and 50% the person hearing, right? So if something is interpreted in a different way than the intention of the speaker, then we address it. Um, and it's an educational moment. It's a moment to talk about, well, this is how I hear that. This is what I'm experiencing when you're saying that. Because otherwise we don't move on. We can't we can't get anywhere with that. And I would say that, it's not the money comes later, right? You
Yeah.
you can't have that experience if I allow somebody to come in and speak poorly to a server and be like, just be a bad actor in some fashion. What's to say that there aren't three customers who experience that in our space, and then say, well, I'm not coming back here, right? So it really is, it doesn't help either, right? To take that person's money, because honestly, there's somebody who's standing there going, you know what, this isn't the kind of place I want to frequent, right?
Yeah.
And it's not the kind of place I want to have. So is it, or the kind of people I want my, staff to be, to feel supported and feel like they're in a safe place. So it doesn't get us anywhere to just let it lie.
There, there's also, I think, with the renewed attention or first time attention, or however people are approaching this, there's also going to be guilt by association if folks don't speak up going forward, or
Yes.
properly distance themselves from very bad actors. And last week you put up a statement, and part of what I read at the top of the show came from that. But you had a festival coming up, which I think was something that we all were looking forward to, just festival season again, or just getting back out into the world. And this one around Pilsners, certainly I think was exciting for a lot of folks. But two of the breweries that came under intense scrutiny and just terrible stories from employees, coming out allegedly about them, were going to be part of this festival.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So,
how did that news land at the brewery?
well, as this all unwound on Instagram and the allegations were coming through, it was a little bit of a shock. We do, we have Pill City, and it is an event that we invite other brewers to participate in. And to be honest, these folks are people we know through the industry, and not necessarily people we know very well personally. We know their products and we know their companies, and there are varying levels of how we actually know them as people. And it was really devastating to see that and to feel the guilt by association. And I'll tell you that as it started to go down the path of looking like we were going to need to cancel the event, um, or not, to postpone it is what we've
Mm-hmm.
actually done,
Yeah.
because these two breweries were involved, and other breweries started to be wary of the fact that, what, the God's honest truth is we don't know each other very well at all. None of us do in some ways. So
The,
like, what else is going to come out,
yeah.
and so like, what about the other people on the list? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Um, and so as that started to come apart at the seams and we realized that we would have to postpone the event, um, I honestly just got very angry. I got very angry as a woman owner, right? With two women who have worked so hard on this event, as the primary people working on this event, that this would be the end result of what happened with this event felt really, really painful. Was really painful and really hard and really sad, with it coming from out of this COVID land. We were looking forward to it a lot as sort of like the light at the end of the tunnel. And it was really, really painful, very, very painful to have to postpone it. But in the end, felt like that was really the only path forward. Some of the breweries were like, no, it's all good. We'll go forward. Other breweries were like, you know what, we're just going to cancel and post. We're just not going to participate in anything for a little while
Yeah.
till we sort of understand, if there's any other, shoes to fall, say, out of the whole thing.
But
They just, they were just wary, as they should be. I mean, we
yeah.
just don't know. And again, like I said, we all know each other from these festivals, and we're there a couple days together with a large amount of people, and we're all pouring beer at our own tables, and we don't we we're acquaintances at best, and a lot of times.
Yeah. The two breweries that you mentioned in your statement, that had a lot of attention and still do on them, Tired Hands in Pennsylvania, Modern Times in California. Um, did anybody at your brewery have a conversation with them before you made this announcement?
It was happening so quickly that we did not. We could not, and it was hard because there are individuals who were called out, the founders in these cases, right?
Yeah.
But there are whole teams affected, and then associated as well themselves with the bad actions that the allegations, and it just felt so terrible. At the time, we thought we might be able to hold the event still, if we were able to sort of kind of go, okay, well, here's what we could do. But it was, yeah, we did not contact them first, unfortunately, and it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard.
But that brings up what I find to be so interesting, because people say, oh, okay, Interboro was going to do something with Brewery X, and Brewery X is bad actors. It isn't always as clear cut as some people think. Like there are, a brewer might know a brewer, or somebody on a packaging line might know somebody in sales, and vice versa. And it's just, oh yeah, they're cool and they have nice beer, and there aren't these, deeper levels of, is the owner a dirtbag, or like whatever, the larger story may be. As you think about going forward with festivals and events, have you all had conversations about vetting in a different way, or thinking about it in a different way? Like, is it?
We definitely have to. We
Yeah.
definitely have to.
Okay.
I think the the association that happens with businesses, um, needs to be needs to be walked back from a standpoint of that it can't be that casual. And I would say that in most industries it probably isn't as casual as we had been, in beer with this. And that's a shame in some ways. It's a little loss of innocence, that we're going to have to walk back, for just to make sure that we understand how things go down in other places before we have those associations again.
You talk about being on, early on I read, the time needs to be over and face the difficult path towards truth and reconciliation. You've been out there with statements, you've been on social media, talking with folks about this, and having a lot of conversations, I imagine, behind the scenes as well, and not only public arenas like this, but quietly among people that you know. Do you think there are actually more people on this path towards truth and reconciliation um, than there were 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago?
I think so. I think so. I think that um, there are more people who came out of their, silence with this than before. There are certainly things that I've never told anybody about. The the irony of all of this was that, the one kind of horrible thing, I mean, not that the other things weren't horrible to be, sort of completely ignored as the founder and CEO of business, to my face, isn't horrible, but the horrible thing of like that the last event that I was at in Miami before COVID, I had not said anything about the fact that I was physically attacked at that event. Now, it wasn't at the event. I shouldn't say it that way. It was sort of ancillary to being there for a couple beer festivals. Um, and, I hadn't told the people that were there with me. I hadn't told my husband. I hadn't told, even our office manager, our back office people who I'm very, very close friends with. I didn't say anything when I came back about what had happened. I think we're at a point where people are more willing to just say, like, look, this is what happened to me. Um, the reality, the backdrop to all of this is that women forever had been in the situation of like, well, what were you wearing is the question, what were you doing that brought this upon yourself? And so we've been trained to not even bother bringing it up. And it's kind of a reflex at this point. One of my employees actually said this was the first job she's ever had, ever in her entire life, that she wasn't surrounded by sexist comments or lewd, sort of statements at work. And she said that the sad part is that she was surprised. She was surprised at the absence of it, which says a lot
Yeah.
about what we expect, what our baseline is. So we have to change that. We have to change that as being what we expect in life. And that our lives are, it matters. Our experience matters.
Have you gotten, since you've been talking about Miami, have people reached out with support, with regret, with actual, you say this is not, you said several times in statements, this is not the time for platitudes.
Yeah.
Has there been meaningful action, steps towards meaningful action?
Not that I know of. Let me just say that. And I'll tell you that one of the tough things to wrangle with this is that this isn't news to women,
Yeah.
This isn't, we're tired of talking about it. And even one of my male employees said today that he's tired of talking about it. He's tired of talking about it, and he said it in a good way. We've been talking a lot about it, and there are a lot of male allies, a lot of men out there, and I have had people reach out from my past who said, I'm really sorry to hear this, and I'm here for you, and that's meaningful. The Where we go from here is really, the truth and reconciliation phrase. I didn't use that lightly.
Yeah.
There's a certain bit of the fact that we all have to move together, and you can't put everybody in jail. You can't, it's not going to be like that, right? But we have to acknowledge that this is the reality, and we have to figure out a way forward. And we have to acknowledge the truth of what happens every day, what happens to people, and not ignore that either. And I think that, moving forward, making sure that all of our environments are set up in a way that there's open communication about anything that happens, that people feel safe coming forward to say what's happened, that there's less um, retribution,
Yeah.
that a woman doesn't feel like she's going to get fired if she says that something happened to her. Um, she doesn't feel like she has to do something, or that this is something that we put more systems in place. And for craft beer, it is where a lot of small businesses and a lot of not a lot of HR departments, or
Yeah.
anonymous reporting systems. I'm hopeful that that we can kind of build this together. We have some bigger entities, the Brewers Association, these things. We have to look at how do we come together to build a system that will support this and not blame people for coming forward, blame the victims,
Yeah.
because that's really the path towards making it change, is the open communication around it.
It's I've been having conversations with my wife about this as well, and she sort of said the same thing, that um, if people are surprised, they really shouldn't be, because this is not something to be surprised about, or not something that has not been happening. You mentioned being tired. In many ways, I feel like for people who are just paying attention now, the real work has to begin to fight the good fight and win it. For those who are tired, and I guess for you who are tired, what gives you the energy to go on? Does anything? Can anything?
The fact that all these women stepped up is inspiring. There were so many stories and so many people that stepped up to say, this is what happened to me. And that really that's a change. That's a change.
As we're thinking about this summer, we're headed into Memorial Day weekend and unofficial start of summer. And as you think about the next 3 months of what this summer could be for Interboro and the industry at large, what to you would be a good sign of, or even a small sign of progress by the time this summer is over?
It's a tough question. Um, I think that I'd like to see more women coming together on a regular basis. I mean, we are starting to do this here in the city, and maybe making sure that we have some better ways to keep track of anything that happens, would be what I'd say in the short term, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we come together and develop some better ways to report issues as they come up. Here in New York City, we've got the Pink Boot Society. We've got a chapter here. We actually have our own Slack channel, or Slack workspace that we all communicate in. But I think the challenges are, how do we make sure that there is a way to keep talking about this, and talk about it in a way that we can carry that forward to our male allies in this, to make sure that we continue to change.
Thanks for taking the time today, and for sharing what's happening with you and with Interboro and the world at large. I know these aren't easy conversations, certainly not for anybody, but they're necessary, and I've really appreciated reading your voice online and through the brewery. So thanks for doing an audio portion of that, and spending some time on the show this week.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity.
My thanks to Laura for taking the time and for sharing her experiences. Check out what Interboro is doing by going to interboro.nyc. And you can also check out beeredge.com for articles, to subscribe to the newsletter, to check out the merch like Camp Rauch beer, and more. And if you're interested in supporting independent journalism, you can learn more about advertising by reaching out to Liz Melby at liz@beeredge.com. And speaking of that, NZ Hops is a proud sponsor of Drink Beer, Think Beer. Harvest has officially ended in New Zealand, and there are exciting hops to choose from, including Nelson Sauvin, Motueka, Rawaka, and the newest hop in the lineup, Nectaron. The white wine, stone fruit, and tropical fruits layered with pine, citrus, and herbal notes offer a range of flavors unlike any other growing region in the world. Learn more about what they can do for your beers by visiting nzhops.co.nz or finding NZ Hops on social media. And Briess has been malting barley for 145 years, and the fifth generation of family ownership is currently leading the company. But the values have always remained the same, producing the highest quality, most consistent malt, and working directly with their customers to help them succeed. From pilsners to porters and everything in between, Briess offers the finest handcrafted malts, extracts, and adjuncts to help you brew the perfect beer. Visit Briess.com or visit their social media channels to see and to learn more. That's it for this week. Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo. Remember to defend Pilsner. I'm John Hall, and new episodes release every Wednesday. That's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.